welcome to our to the Armenian Council of America's panel this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. We are going to be talking about several different topics that concern the Armenian American community at large. I'd like to go over a quick little announcement. For those of you who have any questions, please use the Q&A button or raise your hand and chat it to me directly, and I will make sure that your question is answered. Just a quick little background information right now. My name is Harry Unell. I'm a board member of the Armenian Council of America. The Armenian Council of America is committed to promoting the civic and civil rights interests of the Armenian American community and to champion the causes and concerns of the Armenian American community within local, state, federal governments of the United States. We endeavor to achieve these goals through education, community organization, leadership development, and coalition building with diverse communities. As a grassroots organization, ACA is dedicated to working with all political leaders, offering Armenian-related news, analysts, and resources for policymakers, media, students, and activists. We advocate issues important to Armenian Americans. ACA also aims to strengthen U.S.-Armenia and U.S.-Artsakh ties, the development of programs promoting sustainable economic growth and good governance in Armenia, while promoting the values and responsibilities of global citizenship. Today, we have with us Taniel Koushakjian, who is the Washington, D.C. representative of the Armenian Council of America. He has spent over 15 years working on Capitol Hill on a wide range of human rights, foreign policy, and appropriations issues. He holds a BA in political science from the Florida Atlantic University and an MA in political management from the George Washington University. Just to give us a little bit of background on what we're going to be discussing, over the last year and a half or so, we've seen a lot of changes occur when it comes to Armenian American issues, and specifically a lot of changes on Capitol Hill. And I'd like you to go over firstly the monumental recognition of the Armenian Genocide by Congress. So, you know, how let's get into a little bit of the how and the why, and what brought this, what sort of work was involved in actually getting that together.
Yeah, so first and foremost, thank you to the Armenian Council, Harry, and to the board for having me, and it's really great to connect with your members across the U.S. One of the things that was really interesting at the end of the Trump administration, which is when these recognition resolutions passed both the Senate first in 2019, in the December of 2019, and then again in the House several months later in 2020, which was, of course, like I said, the end of the Trump administration. You had a presidency that was a little all over the place with foreign policy, and a lot of mixed signals. Congress really had been doing a lot of the work when it comes to trying to set foreign policy. If you look at the end of the Trump administration, you had people who had been acting secretaries or acting department secretaries. So you had people who hadn't been even confirmed in their position when this happened at the State Department, which is interesting in and of itself. And then you had a more assertive Congress, and that's one of the things I wanted to start off with, is trying to set the landscape for the audience as far as what we were looking at in Congress, what we were looking at with the settings of control between Democrats and Republicans. As you know, Senator Menendez and Senator Cruz tried to pass the resolution on the Senate floor numerous times, about 5 times before it finally passed, and it was blocked the preceding 4 times for various reasons. At various times, Menendez had tried to bring it up for about almost 3 months. It took him about 3 months, him and Senator Cruz, to pass the resolution on the floor. You had Erdogan in town one time, and Lindsey Graham was in the Oval Office with Erdogan. You had other senators standing up. But the White House and unfortunately the Republican Party, who was opposing that resolution, even though you had a bipartisan support with Senator Cruz there, which was unfortunate, they ran out of people to oppose it. And I think that was one of the strategies of the Armenian American community over 30 years. I mean, we started this effort in the 80s when I was a small child. I hate to give away my age, but I was a small child when this effort really got underway in the 1980s, after the Reagan administration set a policy to, after his recognition, to have a State Department policy that wouldn't recognize the Armenian Genocide. And so that's actually one of the reasons when I'm talking to non-Armenians to say, why is this big push for an Armenian Genocide resolution? It's like, well, there's a policy at the State Department that says foreign diplomats can't use the words Armenian Genocide. So that's wrong, and that's why there's a resolution. And so that's just very basic, simple. But so many people have worked on this resolution for so many years, from so many different backgrounds and age groups. I was fortunate and honored to have been part of the effort for the last 10, 15 years and having that recognition done. And so that persistency, that was one of the strategies, going up there, Menendez going up there, Cruz going up there, the Armenian American community continuing to send emails, continuing to make phone calls. You don't take your foot off the gas when it comes to advocacy. And when you do, you really lose more than what you think you lost when you take your foot off the gas, so to speak. So that constant push and changing with the environment was really, really key to getting that passage and securing that passage in the Senate. Look, there was nothing going to go through committee, because Chairman Risch had said basically that while he was chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, no HRES or SRES resolutions would come up. So anything that was symbolic, which technically the resolution is, would not be going through committee. So the structure within the Senate in and of itself was no resolutions were going to pass. Only laws were going to be going through the committee process. So that was the hurdle of it itself. So and you're going to see the opposite of that now that Senator Menendez is the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So that was one of the hurdles to it. And that's one of the reasons why Senator Menendez and Cruz had to go through the unanimous consent process, or what we call UC, which is the 4 or 5 times they went down to the Senate floor and couldn't get it passed until eventually the opposition ran out of people to put up there. And it kind of got embarrassing, I think, for politicians to get up there and stand and say, no, we're not going to acknowledge this genocide because Turkey, our so-called NATO ally that arms ISIS, trades gold for oil with Iran, and is making so many moves counter to U.S. interests. We're gonna go to bat for them and deny this genocide on their behalf. So that, I think, became too embarrassing for the opposition as well. Then you look to the House. So 3-4 months later, 405, 400. I mean, this was. The vote was overwhelming, and it was. I think such a huge relief. I know we've all said that word as Armenian Americans. We're not in Canada, we're not in France, we're not in Russia. Our government had not acknowledged the Armenian genocide. And for us, it was a sense of relief, because I think we all share that feeling of the government and the land that we call home today believing us and believing our story and acknowledging that. And I think that was a really amazing move. I wish the administration had done it before Congress, but we kept pushing for Congress, and that's part of the strategy of the community, is to keep both hands going at the same time. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can talk to the State Department and the administration while we're continuing to push Congress. And when one isn't doing their job, it's our checks and balances system that ensures that the policy is right and that the execution of that policy is right. And it's up to us as a community, as I would say, the fourth branch of government, which is the community's activism, is continuing to engage never relenting on our policy positions and continuing to have our voices heard. And I think that was really instrumental as well. We've also had other coalitions, other groups, ethnic groups come out and support us for whatever reason. Groups that had formerly been opposed to the resolution, like certain Jewish American groups we were glad to see come around years ago and now advocate for this recognition. And plus you had so much support from the Holocaust Museum putting out statements, world leaders. It was time, and I think Turkey's denial has become so ridiculous that it was embarrassing for politicians to continue to try to deny it on their behalf. Since then, we've had a tremendous shift in everything from the House to the Senate to the administration today. To the landscape of politics and communication. So things have changed throughout the years, and the strategy has as well on the resolution. For those of you who don't know, the resolution was actually a legally binding bill up until 1991, when the agreement between Dole and then President Bush was to the White House would drop the deal was the White House was going to drop their objection to the bill and let it pass if Dole made it not a law, so the president didn't have to sign it. It became a symbolic resolution. So I mean, that we've been changing as a community, we've been adapting to and negotiating and doing this for 30 years now, and it's quite amazing now to see the fruits of that effort, Herculean effort, I would say. For the entire community and for all of our groups and our leaders and those that came before us.
Wow, yeah, definitely. We have before we move on, I do have a question that I do want to ask, but we have a follow-up question from from one of our attendees.
Sure.
Who's asking the policy of foreign state of the State Department officials and to not use the term Armenian genocide. This policy, who enacted this policy? How did it actually start? Right, like there must have been some sort of a push from either a Turkish lobbying group or something like that. But just a quick background on that, just to give us an idea.
Sure. Well, it's no surprise to Armenian Americans that the Turkish embassy, the Turkish lobby, Turkish government was very active in the United States, going back to the 30s when they quashed the film of Ravaged Armenia, Musa Dag, MGM Studios. The Turkish government has been putting a lot of pressure on the U.S. government and the State Department for decades, and they applied that pressure in the 80s with Reagan, the Reagan administration, and after the genocide statement, which was actually on Holocaust Remembrance Day, as when the Armenian genocide was recognized by the Reagan administration. It was years later that the Reagan State Department instituted that policy and basically told the Turks, we're not going to do that again. In fact, we're not going to have our diplomats say that. And so when the community started asking and pushing in the 80s, they started getting resistance and started to realize that the State Department was no longer going to talk like that. The Reagan administration was no longer going to use the word genocide going forward. And so when that happened, the shift went to Congress.
So thank you so much for that. The Herculean effort, as you well described, the resolution enactment in the House and the Senate recently is, so we get through this by pushing and by basically for the last 30 years, like you said, wearing it down, and in essence, it's somewhat, a little shameful that the United States actually, had this kind of policy when it came towards recognizing and the Armenian genocide. Now we get to a point where the Biden administration actually releases a statement, right? President Biden releases a statement using the term Armenian genocide, something like you just recently mentioned hadn't been done since the Reagan administration, right? So this in and of itself shows, like, while it's true, it would have been nice, for both the executive branch and the legislative branch to be on board at the same time when it came to recognizing the Armenian genocide. It has now happened. What, in your opinion, I know there was a mass amount of lobbying that was going on from within the Armenian American community, as well as those members of Congress and the Senate who have in the past championed this issue, right, to get the president to say to release a statement about this. So can you describe for me in a little bit of detail of how the executive branch got involved, and what was that deciding factor? That there had to have been a handful of deciding factors for President Biden to do this, specifically, deteriorating relations with Turkey, what was currently going on between Armenia, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Syria, right? So a little bit of, like, where was that major push, that final push that really put it over the edge for the administration to say something?
So I think that the decision to use the words Armenian genocide as president, Joe Biden acknowledging the Armenian genocide, that decision was something that was made by him and his advisors very early on. I'm talking about during the campaign. And if you recall, he had put out actually 2 statements on the Armenian genocide during the campaign. Now, we all know how valuable campaign statements are, but no one has come to the Oval Office with a record as long as Joe Biden as chairman of Judiciary Committee. Remember when I was talking about that resolution in the 90s that Dole had passed under Joe Biden as chairman of the Judiciary Committee, that particular resolution I'm talking about, which is why the resolution is now in foreign affairs and not in judiciary, the difference between the law and the resolution. I just want to make that clear for everyone. Anyways, with Joe Biden coming in, there were several signals after he had won the election. There were several signals that the White House gave that to a trained eye would lead one to believe that he was going to stay true to that promise. The biggest one being not having spoken to Erdogan. Sure, President Biden had phoned and spoken to nearly every world leader, every NATO leader, and every G7 leader across the globe, except Erdogan. And as you all know, that it was in that first phone call the day before, on April 23rd, that Biden called Erdogan and they spoke, and then it was related to Erdogan, according to the White House, that Joe Biden did tell Prime Minister Erdogan that he was going to use the phrase Armenian genocide the next day, and that was his policy on that, which I thought takes courage. It's not just coming out in a tweet. He had the manhood to pick up the phone and call him and tell him to his face, which is what you want in a leader on an issue as sensitive as this. That being said, there were other signals that you pointed to, a deteriorating U.S.-Turkey relationship, which I would lay at Turkey's feet, and to more so than the U.S.'s. I would point to the deterioration of Turkish and Israeli relations, which, as we all know, Hamas has been headquartered in Turkey for almost I think over a decade now. I mean, the headquarters of Hamas is in Turkey. ISIS operates and gets their resources through Turkey, Turkish institutions and Turkish banks. The U.S. State Department just designated a Turkish company this week for being involved in money laundering with ISIS. So the United States government is very well aware of what games Turkey is currently up to, from Libya to Syria to Iran to ISIS. And everywhere the U.S. turns, we keep seeing a Turkish position contrary to U.S. position and U.S. interests. So that's something that has been a long time coming now, and I think that to quote a good movie, the pattern is full. The pattern was full on Turkish transgressions, and so I think the U.S. government, members of Congress, I can tell you, have sobered up to have after having drank in the Turkish Kool-Aid. They have sobered up to a new reality, and that's part of the shift that we're starting to see with politics in general, and with Congress and this administration. So, but there is a flip side to that coin, which I'm sure we're going to get to.
Yes, definitely. So yeah, so we come to like current day affairs basically now, right? So we've gone through over the last couple of years, and indeed, the 30 years leading up to the last couple of years of like what's been going on with with the Armenian American community's concerns with regards to the Armenian Genocide. And now we move ourselves into what's that next step, right? So where are we going from here, right? When it comes to, we've heard rumors from various other Armenian organizations of like where they want to put their focus on, right? What they want to do when it comes to, okay, now we've got recognition. What's that next step, right? So I don't want to get too bogged down in it, but I think it would be interesting to see if you've heard anything about it, and if you've heard about any sort of pushback from other lobbyist groups who are on the opposing side of the Armenian genocide issue as of right now.
So on the first and foremost, the Turkish and Azeri lobbies are both very well financed, very high powered. These aren't small firms with junior lobbyists. These are seasoned professionals representing some of the biggest countries in the world, one of which is Turkey and the Turkish embassy, as well as Azerbaijan, which is spending a lot of money and has really ramped up their DC presence, which is making things very, very difficult on the Azeri front. I know we've had a lot of success on the genocide affirmation front. There's a lot of reasons for that that we went into. Also, the Turkish lobby is kind of distracted with the Gulen movement, which is really interesting when it comes to lobbying. But the Turkish embassy has they knew it was coming, and they were kind of grasping at straws, trying to get. One Turkish official was even begging a State Department official, like, why hasn't your boss called Erdogan? He needs to call. The Turkish leader was waiting for that call. So things have changed in that administration, but the Turkish lobby and the Azeri lobby has never relented. They've come to accept more so the genocide issue, which actually, I have heard from House staffers, Senate staffers, that in private, some Turkish diplomats over the last 10, 15 years have privately admitted that they wish the United States would have acknowledged the Armenian genocide already so that they could move on to other issues. That there was kind of this sense in the Turkish embassy. Of course, they had to do what they had to do. They had to say what they had to say. They had to, toe the denialist line, because that's who they obey over there. Their Fuhrer, so if you will. So they had to do what they had to do, but we all knew it was coming. That said, there's now other opportunities. In fact, right after it was announced that that Joe Biden had acknowledged the Armenian genocide as president, Turkey said, we're going to buy another S-400. They said they doubled down and said, that S-400 that you have now just sanctioned us for. Well, guess what? even though we're pressuring you to deny the Armenian genocide again, we have this in our back pocket. We're going to buy another S-400. So again, that pattern is full. We know we have a more sober, clear-eyed view of the Turkish-U.S. relationship, but the lobbyists are still there, and that's why you're seeing. I hate to say, not as much advancement on the Karabakh issue politically within Congress and within the administration than you have seen with genocide recognition. Now that said, there have been champions in Congress who have been talking about Artsakh. Our Armenian caucus leaders, Frank Pallone, Adam Schiff, Jackie Spear, Anna Eshu, Gus Bilirakis, David Valadeo, several others who've come before them, Ed Royce, John Porter, Mark Kirk, so many others who have come before and carried that mantle. Chris Smith in New Jersey, Peter King, Nita Lowy, so many others have really carried that mantle. Chuck Schumer and fought for that recognition and fought for Armenia and for Artsakh. We have good friends there, but we need to make new friends and new relationships and more of them. The people I talked about just now are all in their 60s or plus. We need to start working on, because there's now a new generation of members of Congress. It's becoming more diverse. It's becoming younger. You're getting more military people, veterans in Congress, which is really actually a positive thing for Armenian Americans, because they've interacted or have faced militarily some of the threats that we talk about when it comes to Turkey. When you talk about fighting ISIS, when you talk about those who fought in Iraq and look at, I have had friends who fought in Iraq, and they see what the situation is now, what Turkey's doing in Syria. So we have to adapt to that as well. But we can't stop on the Karabakh issue, because that is the most pressing issue of the day. And I would say that as far as the administration is concerned, this logic or theory that, because we gave the Armenian genocide recognition, we got to give the Azeris something, is a failed logic. It's I would venture to say just bad policy. It doesn't work that way. You can't reward dictators. We know how that works. We do as Armenians. We know how that works. We got to get our governments and our leaders to believe us on that again too. So we have our work cut out for us, because when it comes to Congress, which pulls the strings here when it comes to funding, the power of the purse, Congress is responsible for setting that policy and authorizing that spending. It's up to Congress to do so. And right now, the Azeri lobby is very, very aggressive. Just to even get language in the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, on Karabakh in the last 2-3 years has been checked, watered down, and whittled away because of the influence of the Azeri lobby. So we have our work cut out for us there, and we're going to need everything, all hands on deck for Karabakh, for fighting for Karabakh politically in DC.
Yeah. So. Bringing us into today with with the effects of the 44-day war and the struggle and the fight for Artsakh's existence, right? It's become a physical struggle once again, right? I do remember back in 2016 and earlier, right? But before the first sort of little skirmishes, right, that occurred there, right? The amount of lobbying that was done in order to get Artsakh recognized as a state, as trying to improve those relations between the United States and Artsakh specifically, right? There was a lot of work that was being done, right, and not a lot to show for it. And you're right, it has 100% to deal with how strong the Azeri lobby is how invested Azerbaijan and Turkey is in ensuring that their points of view are aligned, that the United States aligns with what they want to do, right? And or at the minimum takes a non-intervention stance, right? Which is very, very concerning, right? And as you mentioned, now with a new generation of Congress members and senators coming in, right? We have this opportunity to actually establish good relations with these people and really push our lobbying forward. And we need to do that as with all expediency. I truly believe that. We have seen a bunch of discussions when it comes to Section 907. If you could give us just a little bit of a background on that for our listeners and watchers, just so that they get an idea of what that is and what it means to have Azerbaijan given an exemption to that.
Sure. Well, two things. One, what we're talking about when you hear Section 907, what is Section 907? Right after the fall of the Soviet Union back in the early to mid 1990s, the US Congress passed a law called the Freedom Support Act, FSA, which talked about or addressed newly independent republics, former Soviet socialist republics, and how the US was going to engage with these new republics. And the US policy was to support freedom in those countries, hence the name Freedom Support Act. That comes with a lot of strings, programs, money. US now had a whole bunch of new countries to give aid to, right? So one of the levers of foreign policy is, well, we give you money for your schools or your hospitals or for trade and and we get you to become more democratic and change your laws to be more business friendly and to allow us to establish, business ties in your country and influence and so on and so forth. Well, when these new countries, i.e. Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, etc., became newly independent countries, there was language that was included in that bill, in the Freedom Support Act, which particularly there was many sections, 907, section 907, so there's clearly a lot of sections, dealt with and specifically had language in there that referred to the prohibition of military assistance to countries that blockade and have land borders and shut borders with another FSA country, and that they would be prohibited from receiving US military aid. In that case, at that time, when the Freedom Support Act was passed in '96, the Karabakh War was already over. Armenia had secured that victory and secured Karabakh at that time. And the Armenian lobby was very powerful then. The Turkish lobby was very powerful. The Azeri lobby, there was no Azeri American constituency in the 1990s, and there really isn't today, but there's still, they try to say that there is, but in the 90s, there was no lobby like that. And the Armenian American community was successful in getting that Section 907 language included in the Freedom Support Act. It actually took a lot of lobbying with Senator Mitch McConnell at the time. It was actually, it wouldn't have been in there without McConnell's support back then, because he was in Senate leadership since then. And he used to have good relationships with Hirar Hovnanian and other Armenian Americans back in the 90s. But after 9/11, obviously that changed. So we were able to, as a community, have that big win of getting 907 in there in that Freedom Support Act. But after 9/11, Congress started change the Freedom Support Act and included a waiver authority and a waiver provision in 2001, which the president could exercise to waive military aid to fight terrorism, was the logic there. And with that, the president from 2001 all the way to today, every year has exercised that waiver authority granted in Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act, that amended Freedom Support Act. And that is what the president by law has to notify Congress and officially waive and say we're exercising our waiver authority on this. In fact, one of the interesting things in this particular case was the way in which it was communicated to Congress. A State Department official basically just picked up the phone and called the Senate staff and told them, which isn't really the normal protocol and isn't the formal way that the White House is supposed to inform Congress of them exercising that waiver authority. That did eventually come, but as we all know, on April 26th, a couple of days later, the news broke that the White House had done so. That just means we have to be more vigilant on 907, but also I would impress upon your listeners to think beyond Section 907, to think beyond the Freedom Support Act, the 25-year-old bill now that was passed in the 90s. Let's be more creative. Let's not be constrained by the parameters that we think we're constrained by when it comes to strategy and advocacy and coming up with language and solutions and ways that we can be successful and advance certain goals. There's a question in the chat about how many states recognize Artsakh. Well, if Armenia doesn't recognize Artsakh, that makes it very difficult for Armenian Americans to go to any state capital and say, we would like you to recognize Artsakh, right? I mean, just think about that. The first question from a legislator, an American legislator who knows nothing about foreign policy, who's a state rep, what do they know about Armenia and Turkey and Azerbaijan, let alone what do they know about Artsakh? And you're asking them to acknowledge it. So if I'm meeting you and you're Armenian and you say, I want you to recognize Artsakh, my first question is, okay, well, who else recognizes Artsakh? Does Armenia recognize Artsakh? And you say no. Well, that makes it really difficult to convince. And so that's one thing that I know we all share as a community, that frustration as far as recognition initiatives and what does that really get us. So I would like to impress upon your listeners to start thinking beyond the ways that we have traditionally been thinking. Things are different in Washington now. The parties are different. The Democratic Party is not the Democratic Party it was 10, 15 years ago. The Republican Party is not the Republican Party it was 10, 15 years ago. Washington is not the Washington that it was 10, 15 years ago. And I think this administration thought that they knew how Washington worked because they had worked in Washington before, and they've come to Washington now, and just after 100 days, they're realizing that this isn't the Washington that they remembered. And they themselves, this administration is learning the ropes, so to speak, of how Congress and Washington, D.C. Functions today in this political environment, in this media landscape, in this hyper-polarized landscape that we see in front of us, which makes our jobs that much more difficult, but it also, in my professional opinion, gives us much more opportunity and gives us more ways to think creatively and to push the envelope. And that's one of the things that I've enjoyed about ACA and working with ACA and your leadership, is that you share that view.
Well, definitely, we've realized, and especially in the most recent times, we've realized that the political landscape within the United States is rapidly changing to the point where these major large powerhouses of political parties are having a very difficult time keeping up, right? And we understand that this, while it provides it creates a lot of confusion and a lot of changes, right, to what we're used to. Those changes and that confusion and that that level of evolution to what is the American political landscape creates opportunities, and opportunities that must be used by us, right? And must be effectively used by us, so that we can see the real changes that need to happen within the American political landscape to ensure a free and independent ARTSOC, to ensure a democratic and free Armenia, right? To ensure that these major hot button issues for us actually, come to fruition, right? So I think we definitely need to think outside of the box. The FSA and Section 907, while it's
useful, it's there, it's a
useful,
law that's on the books.
It's definitely useful.
It's there.
Yeah.
But that's not all that's there. There's more, and wherever we can fill those gaps. We can create that language. We can create those laws, and we got to look outside of what we've traditionally been looking at, as far as how do we use carrots and sticks, so to speak. Well, things are different now. Those sticks have computer chips and microchips in them. So let's figure out how we can keep up with that.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely do need to. I know one of our you mentioned it. One of our listeners asked how many states currently recognize ARTSOC. I believe it's less than 10. I believe it's about
it's about seven,
so.
six,
seven or eight.
I think Michigan was the last one. I could be mistaken on that, but it's about 6 or 7.
Yeah,
that acknowledge it. Honestly, we need to be talking about these issues more, Karabakh and Azerbaijan issues right now more, at the local level too, because we're starting to see a stronger grassroots push from Azeri Americans and Azeri consulates all throughout the U.S. So we need to, while it's not their job to do foreign policy, at the local and the state level, we need to know that there was a war recently, there was an aggressor, there was one party that carried out war crimes and huge human rights violations, and we need to be very clear with what's happened, what side we are on, what side they're on, and what's at stake here when it comes to our heritage, our religion being virtually potentially erased in that land, in historic Armenian land. So we need everyone's support. We need Christian groups who I've started to see more of, but I don't think it's at the level that it needs to be when it comes to the preservation of ancient Christian heritage. And this should be a matter of concern for all Christians, A, and B, for all people, regardless of religion. The destruction of antiquities, cultural and religious historical treasures is beyond a crime against humanity. It's a crime against civilization, and that we need people from the arts, we need people from philanthropy, we need people from religious groups, we need people from historical groups and academia who have the power and the influence to say that our history is on the line, but world history, human civilization is on the line, and that should be worth fighting for.
Definitely. I 100% agree with you there. We need to see and reach out to diverse communities, across the spectrum, whether they be in academia, whether they be in either lawmaking, religious circles, the historical circles of all types, in order to educate them on the issues that we're facing right now, educate them on the importance, right, of what it is that is occurring right now. We're seeing, sites that, while some are like heritage sites that are being completely destroyed. We're seeing the you want to go back far enough. We're seeing churches that are being reconsecrated, into the religion of another, right? We're seeing that completely change, right? And uh, that typically, when you look at world history, right, that typically comes, you know, at a at a time when uh, people are, so disenfranchised and so hunted, right, that it can only be described as, ethnically cleansing a region, right, by removing all historical and all religious artifacts that, describe the people who live in that area, right? And it's horrific, and it's one of the things that, I'm encouraged, just as, the rest of the Armenian American community, by seeing America take that step and recognizing the Armenian Genocide. And at the same time, I realize, just like the rest of us, that there is so much more that we need to do in order to preserve it. Because right now, we are still faced on, with, people coming in from all sides trying to erase, that history, that cultural identity of, a location of a land mass that we describe as home. And it's terrifying to see, and it's something that we definitely need to fight against as much as we possibly can. We have a question real quickly from someone about asking whether or not Congress will strengthen Section 907 in order to avoid the waiver that President Biden enacted. I know we're jumping back, and I'm sorry about that, but like
no, that's fine. I wanted to have an engagement. I know we got about 10 minutes left here in the program, so I wanted to open it up for questions. I want to have an engaging discussion with your audience. So please, there's no such thing as a bad or wrong question. Please enter your question so we can have an engaging discussion, because I prefer to give you what you're looking for and answer the questions that you may have. So thank you for doing so, and I would encourage you to do so here in the time we have left. Going to the question as far as strengthening 907. I mean, they could just they could just strike the waiver authority and amend the law and say we strike, everything after this word, which is the waiver authority, and end it there. We've tried to do that. The community has tried to do that. Members of Congress have tried to do that. Frank Pallone and others, Adam Schiff, with others, Republicans and Democrats have tried to do that, but they've been met with the opposite. And so the negotiation has been, well, if one side wants to strengthen it and the other side wants to weaken it, then we're just going to leave it alone, or we're going to not do anything. And that's the result of a negotiation. One side gets something, one side gets something, or both sides get nothing. They say the most successful divorce is when both sides feel like they didn't get a win, or the most fair divorce when both sides didn't get a win. And so that's kind of how the negotiation, the lobbying, the jockeying for position, power, and influence has manifested itself and resulted in what we have today as far as language that has not strengthened Section 907, even though we keep trying to.
That's great. And we have another question here that says, rather than working for the recognition of Artsakh, do you think we should speak more about the security for the people in light of the war and attacks against peaceful citizens of Artsakh? Or should that be somehow incorporated in our discussions when it comes to recognizing Artsakh? Because as it stands right now, we do have, this tenuous peace, ceasefire that is, whether or not it's actually going to hold, we don't know.
Well, a couple of things. One, we need to continue to ask for and request recognition of Artsakh, while at the same time talking about how that recognition leads to greater security and for Artsakh and the people of Artsakh who have faced a war, who are fighting for their right to exist. One of the things that I will sometimes in certain contexts relate to how, Israel's recognition, a lot of Arab countries or Middle Eastern countries don't recognize Israel's right to exist. And the fact that so many other countries do is what provides for a lot of Israel's security, or leads to the providing to their security. So that recognition is part and parcel. And I think you've started to see just in the language that's used, the recognition of Artsakh and the use of Artsakh more so than Nagorno-Karabakh, which is a Russian term, we all know. So we've been successful in that messaging. And so I think that's part of it. And that's part of that recognition. And so that they're part and parcel. But just because there's a piece of paper that says one side's going to do something and the other side's going to do something doesn't mean that it's going to actually be that way. As we see now with the retention of prisoners of war by the Azeri side, they don't care. They make the rules up as they go. That's the world we live in now, and not just militaries who one day will just walk across a border and say, oh yeah, this is our new border now, and that lake is now ours, and well, you're not here, so we're going to go across this border and take it. That wasn't in the agreement, but that's what you're going to continue to see from the Azeri side, which is similar to what Turkey does. It's this leading by chaos theory. Actually, I had a conversation with a friend of mine about the strategy behind chaos, how you can do so many bad things that you don't know where to start. Right? If you look at the Turkish and Azeri aggressions, I mean, every day it's something new. So we need to get used to that. The Armenian government and the Armenian people over there in Armenia, the citizens, the people whose lives are on the line there, need to realize the world that we live in today is that rules are made up as we go along. And just because there's a piece of paper doesn't mean that it's going to be carried out. This is a new environment politically in Washington. This is a new environment around the world that we are now in. It's a new media landscape. So we need to start thinking about ways that we can have a real impact and not be constrained by thinking, oh, well, we signed a piece of paper, well, that provides for our security. No, you got to put people on the border. You got to put outposts. You got to arm them. You got to give them bulletproof vests and socks and boots and all the things, the necessary resources that they need to do their job. So let's start thinking about how we as a community, as a diaspora, can change the rules and play the games that we want to play to better our country and secure Armenia and Artsakh. Because we know one of the sayings we have in Washington is, if you're not out there lobbying for your position, there's someone out there lobbying against it. So if we're not pushing for these issues, if we're not being responsible and taking responsibility for carrying out the things that we need to do as a diaspora, then we're not gonna be ahead of the game. So that's one of the other things I wanted to share with you, Harry, and with your audience.
Great. We have a couple more questions. So the first one is, if Section 907 is not strengthened, right, will there be parity for U.S. security support in the region? Will Congress allocate funds or insist on the parity? Like, what do you foresee if that situation does come to pass?
Well, parity has been there for a long time now, and it was only until recently that that was broken. I think that I would hope that is the case. That's what we're going to fight for. I think parity, to some degree, should be expected from this White House and this Congress, especially in light of the multiple violations of law by the Azeri side, that we can't continue to reward that kind of action and behavior. And even if the White House wants to, Congress can't be a party to that. So I think there the push for parity is going to be that much greater. And I would say that so far we're leaning towards ensuring that parity.
Okay. And our second question is so over recent weeks and months, President Biden's rhetoric with regards to Russia has become increasingly harsh, right? Will this affect Armenia in any way, right? Especially with its bid under its previous government by Taniel Koushakjian to be a little bit more Western leaning, right? How do you see this stance that's been taken by the Biden administration affecting Armenia?
I think it would actually benefit Armenia. I think there's opportunity there for an increasingly hostile or less beneficial U.S.-Russia relationship is to the advantage of Armenia. Look, I think the Armenian people and the Armenian government needs to also take a sober look at its relationships and its treaties and the countries that it has treaty obligations with, and the history and the pattern there, and where Armenia should be looking for true support and genuine efforts of people to stand with Armenia and support Armenia. Look, I think there's tremendous disappointment in Europe, with Europe as a whole, outside of France, which I don't know what it would take for Armenia to get a bunch of French Rafale jets or other military equipment from France, but that there should be greater security cooperation between France and Armenia, and we're not seeing it from other parts of Europe. We'd like to see greater security cooperation with other Western countries, the U.S. In particular, for Armenia, and that can happen if the people there and the government there has the courage and the strategic insight to think about the world that we live in, and not the world that we hoped and wished that we lived in.
Very, very, very sobering. Yeah, definitely. We need to ensure that we do everything that we possibly can in order to make the Armenia of the future an Armenia that is free, democratic, economically stable, right, and secure. Right. These are the biggest issues, and those people, members of the Armenian community throughout the diaspora in other locations outside of the United States, right, we need to interact with them on a far greater level in order to ensure that these Western, ideals actually, come to fruition. I want to thank you for your time, Taniel. You have been extraordinary. An extraordinary font of knowledge, and I really appreciate you giving your time on a Saturday to come and to speak with us. I want to thank all of our attendees, and if you have any last thoughts on what we've discussed here, Taniel, I'd like to hear from you.
Well, if there's any other questions, I'd be willing to take another one, but I just want to say thank you to Harry and to the council and to all the listeners for being here, for sharing your Saturday afternoon with us, and for listening. It shows that you care, that you're passionate about Armenia and its future, and what we as Armenian Americans can do to help secure that future. And that gives me more hope. It gives me more positivity and more energy to continue to do the things that we all need to do as Armenian Americans. And so I just wanted to say thank you. Let's think differently. Let's be more creative. Let's take a 21st century approach to the challenges that we face as a community here, and that our brothers and sisters in Armenia face. Gerard, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you to everyone for listening.
All right. Okay, so we are going to wrap it up here. I encourage. We do actually, do you have time for one more question real quickly?
Sure.
All right. So last question. I swear. All right. You are asked why do we ask Armenia to be democratic while her neighbors are dictatorships? Does this provide us with is this a shortcoming on behalf of Armenia to be a free and open and democratic society? Your thoughts on this?
I don't know if this is the Kevork Marashlian. I know, which would be fantastic. Who I know is now out on the West Coast. But thank you for the question. I would say that freedom, liberty, democracy is never a shortcoming. It makes us that much stronger. I know we are not only, Armenia is not only in a tough neighborhood, but it's now surrounded by very unstable, increasingly authoritarian, autocratic regimes. Democracies around the world, free nations need to stand together with other free nations. That's what our world order has been constructed and modeled after for 60 years, 70 years now. So the theory that democratic neighbors don't go to war with one another is true, as it was then, as it is today. And so now Armenia is increasingly is becoming in a neighborhood where there are less and less democracies. And so the relationships that Armenia has with those democracies need to be that much stronger and that much greater and that much more fruitful than those with its neighbors as they are today, because we know what's going on in Baku and Ankara. We know those borders are shut. And we know the work that's out in front of us, but we need to use the strengths of our democracy and our values to our benefit, intellectually, as much as we can, physically on the field.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I couldn't have said it better myself. I want to thank everybody again for attending and listening. We will have future events just like this one, where if any questions that you might have that you'd like to be discussed, and it'll be on a wide array of topics, not just Artsakh and Armenia and the current situation that's happening there, but on all of the efforts that we are tirelessly working on behalf of our community. I want to ask everyone, if you do, if you like, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to us. You can find us on the Armenian Council of America on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can subscribe to us, like us, follow us, and if you have anything that you'd like to say to us, or if you have any suggestions, questions, anything like that, we are always more than happy to answer. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and I wish you all a wonderful Saturday, a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing all of you soon.